I used to measure my worth by the number of grease stains on my hands, because every new smudge meant another problem solved. Another customer back on the road, another dollar in the bank, but my family measured worth differently, judging by how many zeros sat behind the salary and how shiny the business card title looked when you slid it across a conference room table. From the moment I told them I'd be joining a plumbing apprenticeship instead of enrolling in a 4-year university, Thanksgiving dinners became less about turkey and more about interrogation lights. "So when are you going to get a real job?" My uncle would chuckle while loosening his designer tie, and everyone would laugh as if the blue overalls I wore Monday through Saturday were a costume instead of a career. I'd nod, grin, bite my tongue, and remind myself that the pipeline under Mr. Campbell's 1920s bungalow didn't care about college credits, that rusted water heaters didn't demand resumes, and that skill, real, tangible, roll-up-your-sleeves skill, paid in ways stock options never could. The insults became family folklore. My cousin Jenna, fresh out of business school, joked that I must love playing in other people's dirt for a living. My brother Kyle posted a meme about trade school dropouts driving rusty vans while he flexed his new desk badge on Instagram. Even Mom, who used to tape my elementary school drawings to the fridge, looked embarrassed whenever a neighbor asked what her eldest was studying. What none of them saw was the inside of my pickup's glove box, where every month I slid another envelope marked deposit. Only first $10, then $20, then eventually whole paychecks into a high-yield savings account I'd opened the day I signed apprenticeship papers. No fancy dinners, no weekend getaways, just relentless budgeting and the promise that one day I'd surprise them all. While they sprinted towards status symbols, leasing cars they couldn't afford, flashing credit cards with annual fees thicker than their wallets, my evenings were spent online, watching DIY tutorials on copper sweating, water pressure regulation, and, quietly in another browser tab, personal finance channels that taught compound interest like gospel. Weekends, they called them bottomless mimosa days. I called them side job marathons, unclogging restaurant drains before sunrise, repairing burst pipes in frozen basements after midnight, collecting each $100 bill like a badge of gritty honor. My phone never stopped buzzing, and neither did my ambition. Soon word of mouth turned into a backlog that stretched 3 months out, and I hired one apprentice of my own, paying him fairly because I knew exactly how it felt to start at zero respect. Then the pandemic hit, and the corporate cousins who'd once bragged about ergonomic chairs found themselves emailing resumes into the void. But plumbers? We were suddenly essential, stepping into empty skyscrapers to keep sprinklers alive, and into panicked homes where quarantine meant every leaky faucet became emergency level annoying. Overtime multiplied, and so did my savings. Each time I stripped off latex gloves in the truck, I'd check my banking app and watch numbers grow while the world outside shrank. I never gloated, never said I told you so, but the next family Zoom call echoed with a new hush when they asked, "How's business?" And I answered, "Busy hiring, actually." By year 3 of my license, I'd socked away enough for a down payment most of my relatives couldn't scrape together, even with their collective degrees. I spent nights scrolling listings, memorizing mortgage calculators, whispering property tax estimates to myself like bedtime stories. Finally, on a crisp October afternoon, I toured a modest 3-bedroom fixer-upper, peeling paint, sagging porch, but solid bones and, most beautiful of all, a price tag perfectly aligned with my FHA-approved numbers. The realtor looked skeptical until I slid paperwork across her desk, pre-approval letter in bold font, and said, "Full asking, 20% down, 30-day close." She blinked. I smiled. The house was mine before Halloween. I kept the news quiet, storing the keys in my toolbox between pipe wrenches, letting the secret season for exactly 1 month until Christmas Eve, when tradition dictated we gather at Grandma's Colonial for gift exchange and invariably career comparison Olympics. The fireplace crackled, eggnog flowed, and just as Uncle Designer Tie leaned in to ask if I was still doing that handyman thing, I cleared my throat and said I'd brought a different kind of present this year. An address. Confusion rippled through the room like a faulty pressure valve until I pulled out a baby blue envelope, handed it to my mom, and watched her unfold the deed bearing my name alone. Silence. Then a sputter. Then a chorus of overlapping questions. You bought a what? Where did you find the money? Wait, without roommates? I let them rattle, savoring the irony that the hands they once mocked now owned more square footage than their combined apartment leases. My brother, still paying off his MBA at 35, mouthed the price I'd paid, like it was foreign currency. My cousin Jenna, juggling 2 Maxed cards, asked if I'd won the lottery. No, I said, I just fixed a lot of leaky sinks. Laughter burst from the cousins who remembered mocking memes. This time, it wasn't at me. It was at the absurdity of their earlier arrogance. Over the next weeks, every spare hour shifted from bank spreadsheets to renovation dust clouds. I pried up stained carpet, installed PEX lines in the crawl space, and rewired outdated breaker boxes. YouTube University paired with union mentors who answered late-night texts about ground fault and joist spacing. Sweat pooled, knees bruised, but each improvement echoed the same mantra, this is mine. Meanwhile, corporate siblings debated office return policies, chained to laptops in overpriced rentals with thin walls and thinner equity. By spring, I hosted a housewarming barbecue. Burgers sizzled on a refurbished grill I'd rescued from the curb, and fairy lights I wired myself glowed above their heads. Walking tours revealed a subway tile backsplash I'd laid, reclaimed wood shelves planed from pallets, and crowning achievement, an en-suite bathroom featuring a rainfall shower that I'd plumbed start to finish. Aunt Karen, who once joked I'd never escape blue-collar grime, ran her manicured fingers along the grout lines and whispered, almost reverently, you did all this. I nodded, flipping burgers with the same calloused hand that earlier tightened a supply line under the sink. Dad, usually stoic, lingered by the tool bench I'd set up in the garage. He picked up my oldest crescent wrench, handle nicked, initials scratched in with a drill bit during apprentice year 1, and said, your mom and we underestimated what this meant to you. I didn't gloat. I just gestured around. Every bolt here is a reminder. In that moment, respect flowed between us, like solder melting into a perfect joint. Finally solid, finally secure. The kind no lecture could forge. The most bittersweet reaction came from Lauren, my high school friend turned family critic, who once told me plumbers smelled like damp basements. She stood in my living room, eyes shining between envy and admiration, and confessed she'd postponed her own home search due to student loan interest resetting. I handed her a cold beer and said, equity smells a lot like PVC cement. Acrid at first, but it cures strong. She laughed. Maybe at the joke, maybe at herself. Growth isn't always found on spreadsheets. Sometimes it's in the humility of admitting you were wrong. As seasons cycled, the mortgage balance shrank, while my business, now 2 trucks, 4 employees, grew enough to fund retirement accounts for us all, because dignity multiplies when shared. Holidays shifted tone, discussions turned from what do you do to how did you do it. College-educated cousins asked for tips on budgeting apps, and I happily shared formulas they once scoffed at. Not out of revenge, but because nobody teaches fiscal responsibility better than the kid who ate peanut butter sandwiches to avoid overdraft fees. Yet I won't pretend everything healed instantly. Some family members clung to the narrative that I got lucky with interest rates, ignoring the decade of clogged toilets at 2 a.m. Others tossed casual jabs, must be nice not having dress code expenses, until grandma, tiny but fierce, finally snapped. Nice isn't the word, earned is. When the matriarch defends you, the debate ends. They stopped mocking. I stopped flinching. Mutual respect settled like fresh drywall mud, messy at first, but it dried stronger than what lay beneath. Late one summer night after another emergency call, this time a burst main at the local library, I came home, showered, and stood on my porch watching the neighborhood sleep. Down the block, realtor signs still dotted lawns, victims of bidding wars. My relatives complained about a brunch. Meanwhile, my porch light, wired to a dusk-to-dawn sensor I'd installed for efficiency, clicked off precisely at sunrise. Consistency, craft, ownership. Embers of pride warmed my exhausted bones. I realized I'd trade every missed happy hour and every scoffed family comment for this view again and again. Sometimes I wonder if the mockery was necessary, if I'd have hustled this hard, without the sting of their laughter pushing me. Maybe yes, maybe no. But here's what I know for sure. The mortgage statements with my name, the creak of hardwood I refinished, the clients who trust me because I treat their homes like they're my own, those are trophies no corporate title can outshine. And eventually, the family stopped asking when I'd get a real career. They started asking if I could recommend a good contractor to upgrade their outdated bathrooms. A year after closing, I refinanced at a lower rate. My credit score immaculate, thanks to never carrying a balance beyond gasoline for the trucks. I celebrated by installing a skylight in the loft, cutting through shingles at dawn, while a playlist of old rock filled the quiet. Midway through sealing the flashing, my phone buzzed with a group chat notification. Cousin Jenna had posted about her upcoming wedding, complaining venues were too expensive. I snapped a photo of sunlight pouring through the new glass and replied, "You could always host it here, paint's still drying, but the mortgage is cheaper than most banquet deposits." Laughter emojis exploded. Irony, now an old friend, smiled with me. On the second anniversary of my house purchase, my little niece Kyle's daughter handed me a crayon drawing of a plumber with a superhero cape. "Daddy says you fix problems nobody else can," she explained, eyes wide. That single sheet of printer paper, child scrawl and all, went on my fridge, where college acceptance letters once might have hung. Legacy isn't spelled by degrees, it's etched by impact, sealed by family who finally see. And so, to anyone whose kin measure dreams in cubicles and credentials, I say this: let them laugh while you labor, let them sip lattes while you sand floors, because when the applause fades and the bills arrive, the person with the toolbox often holds the deed. I don't regret the years of jokes or the smell of PVC primer in my jacket. Those are the sense of independence. My family mocked my blue-collar job, but I bought a house before any of them did, and every night I turn the key, the lock clicks a quiet, everlasting "told you so."